everybody. So I'm going to be doing something a little bit different this time. The following video is actually going to be one of the first classes that I ever actually gave. I used to have this one for sale, but I am just going to be releasing it for free right now because I feel like this is really important stuff. So just be warned, it's like potato quality, but there's a lot of good stuff in there. So make sure that you check it out, and if you feel called, please share it with your friends. I personally think this is some of the most important work I've ever done ever, and it's like one of the hidden gems that not many people have seen or know from me, but it's one that I get the most amount of feedback on. Even though circumstances and things are a little bit different now than when I made it, I feel like a lot of it is still relevant and a lot of it is still important. So enjoy. Okay, so hello everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Again, as I just said, I have some like pretty big feelings about this topic. And so if I'm talking too fast, which I tend to do, if you have any questions, anything like that, you can always just pop them in the chat box, and I'll try and get to that so that we can talk things over, even if I don't catch it, just because I'm not like the most tech savvy person. We can definitely go over them. So first of all, I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here. Welcome to Matrix to Magic. Holy fuck, it could not come at a better time. So my name is Mandi M. You might know me, obviously, if you found your way here. So I'm the author of Witchcraft Therapy, and I guess I'm like a professional internet weirdo. I don't even know what to write on those forums where it says what you do for a living. I'm like, I have no idea. So my mission, like what I love to do and what really fires me up, is helping people connect to and live within their magic. It doesn't matter what kind of person you are. I don't care if you're the hottest of messes, if you don't have a lot of time, et cetera, et cetera. I believe that magic is our birthright and that we all can tap into it in really subtle ways to make our lives better. So I wanted to thank you guys for being here, because right now, it feels like we are at a precipice where things are feeling a lot more uncertain than ever. So most of us are painfully aware of the fact that things don't feel right. Like the way society is set up, the way work is set up, the way our financial system is set up, the way we get our food, like all of these different things, we all feel it in our spirits, and we all know that there's something off about it. And you can see it reflected in like the high incidence of like mental health issues, et cetera, in our society. It's a fundamentally kind of toxic system and environment. And so just by being here and like talking about things like this, we're all kind of in a place where we're able to raise our own consciousness, which in turn does the same for all the people around us and all the people that we interact with as we go out and as we move through the world. And when we do that, what we're essentially doing is diverting our attention away from the matrix. And I'll get into what that is in a little bit here. So my intention tonight is that the things that we talk about here would give you some tools and strategies for shifting your perspective to stay in your magic, despite the, clusterfuck of all of this stuff that's out there that is constantly grabbing at our attention and constantly vying for us to be looking at it. Do you know what I mean? And so if you know me, then and if you've been in any of my spaces like the Coven, or if you've read my book or anything like that, then you know that my perspective of magic is that it's sort of like an escape pod or an emergency hatch to get away from the mundane shit of life that can really just feel so crushing and overwhelming. And I think that when we get in touch with our personal magic and our personal power, what we're able to do is invite a very soulful bit of self-care into our lives, right? And so for me, magic is a connection. So it's to self, it's to divinity, it's to, it's having one foot in almost a different space, right? And that's kind of what witchcraft is all about. And also empowerment, right? So witches are not typically don't see themselves as passive agents in life. Typically, witches do things. Witches heal. We take action. We try and transform, right? So it's just not the sort of thing where we can see something and see that we aren't empowered and that we're just going to be like, okay, well, I guess we're just not empowered and that's just the way we're going to be. That's not how we approach it. Usually we want to be empowered, and magic is our way of doing that. And so just as a little disclaimer, kind of, I'm not going to talk about specifics when it comes to current events. We have enough of that. And honestly, if you look at the timeline of human history, there's always been fucking something. Like, it's awful right now, but there's always been something. And I don't really feel like we need to get into like the low vibrational basics of what's happening, because we're all fucking aware of it and we're all entrenched in it. So I'm not going to get into specifics too much. And also, just another disclaimer, this is more harm reduction, right? Like, I'm not trying to say you should quit your job and you should sell all your shit and sprint off into the forest. Number one, that's not going to be helpful. And number two, that's my forest. So find your own spot. So just a little overview of some of the things we're going to talk about tonight. So what is the matrix? And that's a very nebulous concept, but that's something that we're going to get into first, and how it all affects us and why, like the specifics of why this situation that has come up is so problematic in the context of the modern world. And then also after that, we're going to talk about some strategies and mindset shifts that we can make to reclaim our energy and break free. Because right now, a lot of us feel like we're in this position where we only have so much energy. And when it's being funneled into this horrible system that is not feeding us back, we end up just feeling depleted, and it becomes its own terrible cycle. So first of all, I'm going to tell a little bit of a story. So we are going to go back in time. Once upon a time, things were different for humans. Okay, we were born as animals into a struggle in the natural world. We are evolved primates. We are mammals. We are animals. And we, at one point, lived that way. We were of nature, and we lived in a way that was wild. And if you look at human history, they can see in like the archaeological records and things like that, that humans are spiritual beings. We try to interpret the world around us through the use of symbol, through the use of ritual, like all of those sorts of things. Whereas now it's almost like we have this cult of logic, which is a good thing in some ways, but I think it's also really just it's suppressing something that I feel is a very fundamental human need. And so it's no wonder that a lot of us are going through life feeling like there's a hole or a piece missing, right? So somehow we went from that, picking berries, wandering, doing the whole mammal in the wild thing, to, whatever the fuck this is, right? So if you want to build something, for example, you want to build a shelter for you and your family. Okay, well, you need a permit. Well, like, what the fuck is a permit? Well, you got to make sure that it's legal. Well, what the fuck is legal? Oh, it's just what the government says. Well, what's the government? Oh, it's those like boring, annoying fucking white guys over there that are like 90 billion years old and they don't know shit about fuck. So you can see in this situation, a lot of our existence is governed by fake self-imposed barriers and limits and bullshit, right? And when I say self-imposed, I'm not saying we are doing it to ourselves. I'm saying humanity somehow, I wasn't there, somehow we've got ourselves in this situation that is so absurd, it's laughable. When it's not tugging at you in such a depleting way, you can look at it and go, what the fuck is this, right? So our routines, our mindset, a lot of our existence, the way we work, the way we view each other, all of these different things is governed by a lot of these essentially fake rules. So what happened was humanity at some point traded freedom for security. And so when I say freedom, I mean that in the most neutral sense of the term. So when we hear freedom, we usually think of, think of it as something positive. It has a positive connotation, right? We want to be free. But when I say free, what I'm meaning is just like you didn't have to go work 9 to 5, but it's not like you are like, ooh, I'm free living large. Like, no, you're fucking hunting, you're wandering around, you're trying to survive. So when I say freedom, I just mean that we weren't in this invisible cage. And so at a certain point, we exchanged the hazard of wild living for the comforts and security of things like food security, infrastructure, and we as a species, under the protective umbrella of civilization, were able to be successful. And again, when I say successful, I mean that in the most neutral sense, because it feels almost as if we are successful in terms of survival. Survival is way easier, right? I can get food from the grocery store. I don't have to go fight a boar or, whatever else. We are more successful in terms of survival, but at what cost? Because it feels like it's almost at the cost of living and of truly living and truly standing in our power and recognizing our divine nature and our spiritual nature and this human animalistic need for fulfillment. Which brings us to, what is the Matrix? Now, this is very nebulous, and this is something that I had a lot of trouble, but for our purposes here, it's not this, it's not like, Neo and I can't even remember with that movie. It was like everyone was in pods and aliens were feeding off of it or something. It's not that. So for our purposes, what we mean by the Matrix is the overarching framework of societal and cultural programming. It's our economic system. It's the way shit is set up. It's late stage capitalism. It's all these awful things. But it's also more than that. It's a mindset thing that we've all been somewhat infected with. So in occult philosophy, there's the concept of an egregore. So this is a thought form. This is something that arises from human consciousness, all paying attention to one thing, right? And so in this way, the matrix is the egregore of everything that is possible, acceptable, and important under this whole paradigm. So this whole worldview of the way things should work. But it's also beyond that. So it's McDonald's, it's Walmart, it's governing bodies, it's news media, it's social media. It's the fact that 1% of the people are hoarding all the wealth. It's the fact that a handful of corporations are fucking our planet over while we're scrambling to get paper straws. It's just the fact that everything is so messed up. It's the church's historical assault on any other differing worldview and the amount of history and the amount of culture that we lost through that as a species. And it's the boring, low effort, oppressive view of reality by mainstream logic and science. I consider myself a very logical person, and I consider myself a skeptical witch. But at the same time, I wholeheartedly reject this idea that like we just are born, our spirits is nothing but zaps in a brain, and then we fucking die. Like that to me is one of the, like, it just doesn't seem like a good explanation. It seems very bare minimum, right? So when we're talking about the matrix, it's very hard to define because it's really just the great illusion. It's this invisible cage that we feel. And it's anything, I think, that is a denial of our true divine and animalistic nature. So the matrix to me is the wedge between all of us as conscious sovereign beings and our true nature, our desire for fulfillment, our desire to be, self-sufficient, all of these different things that are deeply ingrained in our spirit, in our humanity, that are no longer made palatable to us while we're being raised in the school system, while we're, it's a lot to, unfuck. And it's hard to do that too, especially when you have kids, because it's like you can try and untangle it yourself while trying to not have them fall into the trap too, because it's so pervasive. And I think that as a species, most of us on an individual level need to get back to our magic. We need to, because the mess that we are in, I believe in the human spirit, and I believe in human ingenuity. And I think that we are so resilient that we could find a better way to approach life than, whatever this is. So for the purpose of tonight, I wanted to make a very clear distinction between the framework of the matrix and the raw and real interface of nature, lived experience, and consciousness. Okay, so there's a lot of points where we see in the news or we see in social media that X, Y, and Z is happening and people feel this way and this is what's happening and you should feel like this and all of that. But we need to get back to a place where we go, well, am I seeing this in my real life? Am I feeling this for myself? Are these values even the values that I have? Like we have to have a bit of discernment, right? And that's mostly what I'm going to be talking about tonight. So for example, the piece about magic for me, I don't consider myself a high level woo person, but at the same time, I do reject the current paradigm that says that reality, this is all it is, and that you're just a collection of, electrified meat and bones. It just doesn't do it for me. So I reject it. Now, the problem with our nature as humans and the context that we're in right now is that adaptations that were advantageous to us in history in the past are unsustainable, toxic, and problematic in the current context, right? So we as humans have evolved certain traits, for example, empathy. If you were in tribal societies and you were an empathetic person, that is a pro-social behavior. So you were a better member of your tribe. Things worked out better for you. It was a good, advantageous thing. But now when we can get the news 24/7, I can wake up at 3:00 in the morning, roll over and find out what's happening somewhere, God knows where, that has nothing to do with me, all the atrocities in real time. We can all do that. We all have access to that. And I feel like what the problem is that we have evolved these specific traits that can't handle it. We are not meant to have this sort of access all the time and have our mental health can't not be affected by the way things are right now. So we end up with these things like, there's constant connection, there's social media, there's a lack of purpose, right? So a lot of us, if you're getting up and you're going to work and then you're so tired when you get home, you got to take care of your kids, but you don't really have the energy to play with them, and then you got to make dinner and then you got to fucking pay your bills and then you got to stress out how you're going to make money tomorrow. That's not a society or an environment that's conducive for you to live your higher purpose, right? And there's, we have to have our base needs met first in order to get to those higher level places where we're recognizing self-actualization and things like living our truth and our higher purpose. It's very hard to do that when you're caught in the fucking shit cycle of just trying to keep yourself fed, keep your family fed, keep a roof over your head, and not go fucking crazy. That's the situation that we're in. And also we have this lack of support for physical and mental health within this framework of the matrix we're living in as well. It's bananas to me that we can have governments and regulations and all of these different things that are put in place to protect people. And at the same time, we can have people suffering from absolutely devastating, staggering rates of mental health issues with barely any help at all. And some of the help that people get is just not fucking good enough. It just isn't. And that's because they're also caught up in this system. So yeah, it's wrong. So along the way, not only did we drop that freedom for security, there were other things we dropped too. Our self-sufficiency. It was not that long ago. It's only maybe one or two generations that people actually knew how to do shit. And some people still know how to do shit. I didn't. I had to fucking recently learn how to do things like garden. I had to recently learn how, there's things that were normal for people to know in order to survive. Like, you're a human, you need to learn how to preserve your food and do this and grow stuff and do that. And that's not That's not a thing that is prioritized within this framework. And I think that's a deep need that people have. We'll get back to that. But we've lost that. We lost our magic. We lost our ritualistic behavior in this whole like cult of logic. You know, if you're a person who lives your life in a ritualistic way, then people are like, they kind of poo poo it a little bit, right? And it's because of the indoctrination and the entrenchment in this terribly limiting paradigm. And also our courage to stand in the chaos of the natural world. We are not promised safety or security. Nobody in any species is. Nobody is any species is, but we have told ourselves that we are entitled to this, and so it's very difficult for us to have the courage to try something different. So essentially, what we have right now, the problem is we have this perfect storm. It is an absolute terrible recipe of these ingredients that have come together that have led to this current collective mental health crisis. And so just another little disclaimer, when I talk about things like the collective consciousness or anything like that, man, I don't fucking know what's truth. I don't know what's real. I'm just out here trying to figure it out just like everybody else. I'm of the mind that nobody knows what the fuck is going on and that maybe we aren't entitled to know. But I am talking about that for the state of this, just because based on my own lived experience, my own consciousness, that rings true for me because based on what I've seen. So the situation that we have right now is it's very important to know this. And this is my mantra in times of stress, which have been, a lot in the last little while. This is a very natural response to a very unnatural situation. If you are feeling overwhelmed, if you are feeling if you are feeling like you are under psychological attack, just being alive right now, that is a natural response to an unnatural situation. It is not our filters that are dysfunctional. It is the environment and the stimulus that is deeply, deeply dysfunctional. So it's very important that we keep that in mind and don't just use this as another excuse to tell ourselves, oh, I can't handle everything. I can't be a grown-up. I can't cope with life. I can't. No, these are natural responses. It's the current context that is fucked. We have evolved these traits in a way that was advantageous to us. It's not right now, not because of us, because of the situation we're in. So I guess that brings us to the important stuff. So how do we stay in our magic when there is such a very deeply flawed situation that we're dealing with here? So there's two different ways that I'm going to be talking about tonight. So the first way are mindset shifts. So mindset shifts that we can make in order to show up better and navigate through this, shitstorm a little bit better. And then there's lifestyle shifts that can help keep us rooted in our power and staying in our magic. Just add more water. So the first of the mindset shifts is favoring perspective. In a world that is constantly connected, we struggle with boundaries. We struggle with boundaries so much. And we aren't encouraged to have boundaries. And a big part of this is really to examine and make a very clear distinction of the things that are in your immediate or intimate circle versus the larger picture. And I'm not saying to ignore the larger picture. I'll get into that in a minute. But you can do more good by focusing on this intimate, immediate sphere than you can scrolling in mindless panic on the bigger picture. So we really need to ask ourselves, where are our efforts and our attention going? Is it going to our highest good? There's the old saying that you shouldn't have to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. And the situation we're in is that a lot of us are burning and nobody is being kept warm. So, as we become more aware of things like responsibility or privilege or the truly horrific and deep injustices in the world, we feel an obligation to help, or at the very least, not be ignorant to it. So we feel a deep responsibility to be informed, and that's a good thing. That is a pro-social behavior that has evolved, that is being hijacked by this constant connection and this constant barrage and onslaught of news media, et cetera, et cetera. Look, I'm a freelance writer, okay? I see behind the scenes, and what I can tell you is they're wanting to get clicks. They want to do whatever they can to get clicks so that they can get ads. This is just the way shit works. And it's not shit on them. They're trying to run their business as well. I get it, but at what cost, right? And so we evolved to have this empathy, but it's being hijacked by this constant connection. So the answer is we have to have perspective, and unfortunately we have to give it to ourselves because they're not going to stop. Things, if anything, we have become more connected. We've become more aware. You know how many news reports I saw since COVID started about asteroids and shit like that? Like, well, maybe this asteroid's going to get. I don't think we have an increase in asteroids. I think they realize people are going to click on shit that makes them upset, right? And so we have to kind of know that and provide ourselves with our own boundaries. Because the thing is, the matrix is propped up on our energy. So when we operate from a place of fear or overwhelm, it benefits while burning us down. Because the thing is, if we operate from a space of fear and scarcity and limitation about what's possible, we do things like mindlessly consume. I feel like shit. I can't handle everything that's going on. I really just need an escape. So, for me, it was things like binge watching TV. For me, it was things like binge eating. For some people, it's things like add to cart, right? So all of these things are propping the system up off of us. We are feeding it. It's not feeding us. And I'm in no way saying that you shouldn't be informed. But we have to have boundaries and we have to keep perspective. So a very excessive example I'm going to get, I'm like the queen of terrible excessive examples, and I love it. I love it so much. So imagine it's back in the 90s. You want to know what's going on? You have to watch the 6 o'clock news. You don't have the fucking news all day, every day, in the palm of your hand, in your pocket. None of that shit. You are out living your life, doing your thing. It's a bit more balanced. I'm sorry, it was more balanced. So imagine it's back in the day and you've got the 6 o'clock news and you watch the news and you're like, everything is shit. And then you go back to your family and the rest of your night, is shit because your mood is all fucked and you're yelling at your kids and all of that. But I mean, ultimately your day is done at 6 o'clock, whatever, you're just going to go on. Nowadays, it's very easy to get caught up in doom scrolling, and it's very easy to have that really be a hole in our energetic bucket. And so, the example that I'm going to give is say there's a parent who is really caught up doom scrolling for some particular reason, and it's a good reason. Maybe there's something happening that they care about, or maybe it's something they're concerned about that will impact their future, or it's a judgmental free thing. We all have our reasons for doing this, but then imagine their child is trying to play with them or get their attention, or they sense they're upset, so they're being a shit, because kids do that as well. And then the energy they're bringing back is not good. So this is what I'm saying. When we raise our frequency and our consciousness, this is the avenue to which it raises other people, because then we're able to interact with our children better. We're able to interact with our neighbors better. We're able to show up to the world in a way that isn't fear, 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 anxiety, 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 right? And the sad truth is, this barrage of information and, care about this, 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 care about this. The sad truth is that this barrage usually does nothing for you or even the shit you're supposed to care about. All it really does is change your energy in a negative way. And for that reason, we need to force our own boundaries. And it takes discipline. It really does. So what that looks like is, you might say to yourself, well, I believe you should be informed. I believe you should be informed. Do you need to know what's going to happen? Do you need to know if it's different than it was 10 minutes ago? We don't, but it's human nature. And it's even in memes and stuff. Like, that's what's normalized in this invisible cage, so that we all, like, fuck, Facebook and Instagram went down yesterday, and there was somebody that tweeted this thing about how, like, depression could be cured if they never came back on. It was retweeted thousands of times, and yet we're still fucking sitting on social media retweeting it and we're all aware of it. That's the crazy thing. We're all aware of it. And yet we feel as if we have to exist in it. It's bananas. So what we need to do is say, we want to be informed. Maybe we do a check-in. Maybe we say, am I emotionally equipped to deal with what's going to be on the news right now? Do I have something I need to do after this? Do I need to give my kid a bath? Do I need to go talk to my husband about something that maybe requires me not to be a huge raging bitch? Like, these are the things we have to think about. So we have to ask ourselves, am I emotionally equipped to check on the news? And I mean, I've had long stretches where I have not been, and I have had to ask other people, can you just fucking tell me if something that, like, can you just tell me if an asteroid's going to hit my house tomorrow? Like, can you just tell me if something's going to fucking affect me? Because I don't have the emotional energy to even check in on this shit, because it's hard to, even with the way the internet and everything is set up, it's hard to even dip in to check, because you dip in and you get funneled in the vortex. And that's what it is designed to do. It is doing its job beautifully, beautifully. And then that goes with other things too. Am I emotionally equipped to be on social media right now? Am I feeling like shit about myself? Am I feeling like an imposter? Do I feel like everybody else has it all figured out than me? Am I feeling like I'm coming from a space of scarcity and I don't want to see somebody else thriving right now? Right? That's not necessarily coming from a bad place either. It's human nature, but we have to ask ourselves. And right now we're in this culture where it's very normal to just keep, we refresh without our free will. Like, it's just something that it's almost like it's refreshing us. It's really wild. And if you've ever seen the documentary on Netflix, The Social Dilemma, it's terrifying as well. Terrifying. So we have to also ask ourselves, am I fighting back with anxiety or meaningful action? Right? Because this is another aspect of it. We tend to have all these things like, you need to care about this and this and this and this and this. And we're like, oh, okay. And then we see everyone else is like, oh, we care about this. And we're like, oh yeah, we care about that too. That person isn't saying they care about that. Well, maybe that person fucking donated money. Maybe that person donated their time. Maybe that person is actually doing something. We have also become, under the framework of the Matrix, very performative. We want everyone to, love us and understand us, because again, that is an evolved trait for humanity that was beneficial, that is being hijacked by the current context. So we really have to check ourselves in a very real and very disciplined way. And it's fucking hard, you guys. Like, I pretty much quit the news. I try and check in just once a day, but unfortunately I'm a writer and I do have to spend a lot of time on social media, and so I accidentally see shit and I'm like, oh, I've ruined my day. But there's also I just got sidetracked there. But there's also the fact that social media. That was another thing. I was finding that I was just in this place where it was just like I was living there instead of living here, at least more than I wanted to, because I need time more than I need anything the internet is going to give me. I feel like almost every problem I have could be solved by more time. And so I made a choice and I decided I'm going to spend less time on social media. And I tried to regulate myself. It took me 24 hours of refreshing against my own free will to realize that I could not do it by myself. And so I installed a blocking app on my phone, and y'all, I'm living my best fucking life. It took 3 days of that. And it was discipline, because the first day I was like, well, I'll just pause it and whatever. It does take discipline, and sometimes we need help, and that's okay. Because if this technology is here and it's harming us, we can also use it to work in our advantage, right? So perspective is priceless. When it comes to this world where everything is pulling at your heartstrings and vying for your attention, it's important to have that space put between you and your reactions to things, your emotional reactions to things. It helps to spend less time operating from dense, low vibrational states, right? States like fear and things like that. And then if we do that, we are more clearly able to filter importance. So right now, the problem is it's very hard for us to filter importance. And I know for me, I struggle with it massively. It's so hard for me. I'm like, well, it all seems important. When really what's important is this sphere around me. That's where I can do the most good. That's where I can do the most good for the whole fucking world. And the more attention I take away from the matrix and spend on things that have value, the more I'm not propping it up with my energy. So just to recap, favoring perspective, there's a few different ways we do this, and these are written out in the workbook. So making very clear distinctions between your immediate and intimate realm and everything else. Trying to make very clear distinctions between helpful, meaningful, and just empty performative actions. Doom scrolling versus staying informed. It's a big one. And a very critical examination of what feels important or stressful and whether it needs to be on your radar in the first place. And this is why I love nature, because if you go for a hike or something and you're pissed off about some report you didn't get on the right day and et cetera, when you're on a hike, that's when you laugh about it, because you're like, what? This is what's real. What, so it's a huge vibe check. And the favoring perspective, part of that also is cultivating your own magic and your zen. Because at the end of the day, magic is living in an intentional way. It's mindfulness. It's cultivating your energy. It's raising your vibration and your consciousness so that you can stand in your power, which means standing in your power is really just as simple enough as recognizing what's good for you and doing that. It can be that simple, and it feels hard because we're fucking tired, So the second mindset shift that we can do that helps divert energy away from the matrix is to challenge the current paradigm. And by that, I mean the current worldview of all the things that are possible, the current reigning thought on how things work, et cetera, et cetera. So aware or not, and it's bonkers to me, but there are quite a few people who are not aware of this or are unwilling to look at this, which is also human nature. So, it is what it is. But aware or not, we have been indoctrinated into a very specific paradigm about what's possible, what's good, and what's acceptable. And the thing is, we don't have somebody coming to tell us like, oh, you can't do that, and you can't do that, and you shouldn't do that, and if you do that, people won't like us. It's more pervasive than that. It's in our movies, it's in our TVs, it's in our books, it's in our news media, it's in our social media, it's in all of these different things. I mean, when you think of how many people out there are afraid to show up as their authentic selves, right? most of us on some level are afraid to do and be and show up the way that we want to. Why would that be? Could it be that like there's the fucking movie trope all the time of, oh yeah, this is my, deadbeat sister and she's 45 years old and she's dressed in fancy colors and she doesn't have a regular job and she's just such a hot mess for the family. We grow up seeing that and absorbing that, and it shifts the way we feel about life. It shifts the way we feel that we are allowed to show up to life, and it shifts the way we think, what we think will happen should we decide to do that. So it's very it's everywhere, and it's very hard to untangle. And yeah, when I say they, or I say the matrix or things like that, I have to just say, it's not that I think there's some shadow cartel, or I'm not one of these people that thinks the world is like we're all being puppeteered by reptilians or something like that. I mean, that could be the case. As I said before, I don't know shit about fuck, right? So who even knows? But what I'm saying is we don't even need to have that. We don't even need for that to be the case. This system was built and it's been left, and it's just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger and more unruly. And it's just so toxic on its own that it doesn't need to even have someone behind it at this point. It is what it is, and it's bad enough on its own. So basically what I'm saying is, in the matrix, in the invisible cage, in this current framework of what we think life is, there are implicit guidelines that dictate our reality and how we show up to it. And that's pretty serious. So some examples of that would be shoulds or what ifs, what your life should look like and when. How old are you? How many kids do you have? Do you have a nice house? Do you have a normal job? Do you have all of these things? That is part of matrix thinking. How to conduct yourself. How do you act when you're around people? Are you being appropriate? Are you not being appropriate? Are you being like, are you just being a little bit too much? It's how you conduct yourself. It's how we approach problems. Man, y'all, we are a quick fix instant gratification society. And you see it on every level. And it's unusual when you think of the fact of how we evolved, where things very much weren't that way. But of course we would latch onto that right now. We were born into a struggle and now we don't have a struggle. Yes, give me some of that, right? So it's normal. It's a normal response to an abnormal situation. It's our worthy values. What do I want to be rich? Do I want to have an ass like Kim Kardashian? What's a worthy value in society, right? We aren't typically directed to explore that for ourselves, right? It's like I said, a fish in a tank might not be aware there's water, and that's the situation we're in, right? It's just so all around us, and we're so entrenched. And it's how much participation in this busted ass system is even necessary. I mean, we all make jokes about running away. I mean, the cool people do, running away to the woods and et cetera, because we feel it. We know it's wrong. We feel it, right? But then we have this idea, well, we have to be reliant on this system. How would you survive? And how would you do this? And how would you do that? And that's why I'm not saying to do that. I'm saying we need a harm reduction approach, because the thing is, the more of our energy we can move away from the matrix, if we even put, I don't know about you guys, if I even had a couple drops extra of love to give myself instead of love to prop up that system, I would be showing up to all avenues of life just that much more refreshed. And at this point, I don't care if I'm grasping at straws. I'm happy to take the straws, because we need it. We need it. We all are very low on spoons. So a good example would be a few years ago, we realized we were never going to be able to buy a house where we had lived. The rents were so astronomical that I was like, I don't even know how we can pay rent. And we were both like in management positions. How fucked up is that? Plus, and that's not even to feed kids or do anything. So we were like, oh my God, we're so screwed. We decide to move here, which is 5 hours away. We're right in the middle of the province. We moved away from all our friends. We moved away from all our family. We had we had a contingency plan for if we got homeless. We're like, we'll just drive 5 hours and live in a basement of a family member. Like, we had to think this out. And everybody we knew was telling us how fucking crazy we were. They thought we were crazy because it seems crazy to do this, because we have these ideas, these limitations, like, oh, you can't do that. Like, you need this, you need that. I'm not saying it was super easy, but I am living my best fucking life. I have not looked back once. And that was, to me, one of these huge times that I've seen that this paradigm isn't necessarily accurate. It's not, like, we're limited by things that we don't even know. So we're already living in this space of feeling as if the bad shit's already happened, right? Because we're so anxious about it, we're so worried about it. So most of these are limiting beliefs, right? Even in the case of how you should behave in life. You could go show up the way you want to show up in life, and people might make fun of you. They might reject you, whatever. But at the end of the day, even untangling that thought, who fucking cares? Honestly, who fucking cares? If you only have so many years on this earth and you're spending it trying to please everybody else, you're not living, and it's squandering this beautiful gift of being here and having this consciousness and all of that. So we have to ask ourselves, when it comes to these beliefs about what's possible and what's important and what's real, we have to ask ourselves, are these things inherently true because they are true, or are they true because we believe them to be true, and because we have been told that they are true, and because we have been immersed and entrenched in all of these messages, like, don't step out of line, don't go live for yourself, like, you can, something bad's gonna happen. Is that true, or does that deserve challenging? And I think it deserves challenging, because we have to give our own intuition, our own consciousness, and our own lived experience some seat at the table. And so when we challenge those ideas, we open ourselves up to unlimited, expansive possibilities, and we dissolve the pillars of belief that are holding up the matrix. Can you imagine if everybody just all at the same time just was like, no, I'm just going to do what I feel is right, and show up the way I feel is right, and dress the way I want, and act the way I want. And you know what I mean? If everyone just did that, it would be very hard for magazines and stuff to tell us we aren't good enough. It would be very hard for us to look at social media and pop culture and things like that and constantly being like, I don't measure up, right? So at the end of the day, the situation we're in is we need to unfuck our mindset, because once you see the limitations of this current paradigm, you can't unsee it. You can't unsee it. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. So we're not just simply diverting our fucks away from the matrix, but from anything that is keeping us in our power, right? And when you do mindset shifts like this, and you kind of decide to really lean into how you feel and what your values and beliefs are, and what you want out of life, what you want your life to look like, what you want to how you want to come across to the people around you that you love, and things like that. When you challenge these limits with these mindset things, it helps you to break free of that invisible cage, which can be lonely, but it's important. And a very interesting and amazing side effect is that we're then free to step into our truth and authenticity, because we're not being limited by these things that aren't even fucking true on their own. They're only true because they're being propped up by collective belief. So once you step out of the invisible cage and you untangle yourself from the limitations or like rules on like how you're supposed to live, you become free in a way that compounds exponentially in terms of your happiness. Because at the end of the day, how much fight or energy do you have left for self-care, for pursuing your passions, for doing the things that you want to do. How much fight and energy do you have left for that when you spent your entire day trying to conform to this little fucking box of what you think you should be in order to succeed in a very toxic world? You're not going to have much left. So it's important to divert any little bit of fucking energy away from that. So I'm of the belief that we live in a web. So it's a dynamic system that is constantly shifting. So I'm of the belief that when you heal your own place in the system and how you move through it, you're changing your reliance on it and you are reclaiming your power. Because at the end of the day, again, it needs us more than we need it. That is very clear. That is very clear. There are fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer benefits to all of this as it starts to decay. I always say the simulation's decaying. Rejoice. So basically, if we can, on an individual level, change the way that we approach it, change our belief in it, change our reliance on it, and change the energy that we're giving to the world around us in our immediate and intimate sphere, and where we're placing our attention and where we're doing all of these things, then what we are doing is, it's like the butterfly effect. It influences your kids, it influences your neighbors, it influences your friends. It's got fingers, and it goes out through this web. And I believe that as sovereign conscious beings, we have immense personal power, right? So although that isn't encouraged or acknowledged by the current paradigm, it doesn't actually need to be, because on an individual level, we can all act as the doorway. We can all choose to just step through it, and we can choose to try and untangle our mindset. We can choose to change where we're putting our focus, where we're putting our energy, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't need to acknowledge us. It doesn't have to. We can just do that. So there's a few lifestyle shifts that can also help with kind of reclaiming your magic despite all of that fuckery. And so an overview of the ones I'll be talking about. So taking sustainable action is one of them. Rewilding yourself is another. It wouldn't be a space that I'm operating if I didn't talk about rewilding. And living deliciously. I think that's the three-prong approach to getting back to our magic, despite having to participate in a system that is fundamentally flawed. So the first thing is sustainable action. And I don't mean necessarily sustainable in terms of like the climate change buzzword. What I mean is things that you can do that are actionable and sustainable in the terms that you can kind of stick with them, right? So there's two really important things when it comes to taking sustainable action to be aware of. And there are two things that we all know, but it's about that discipline. I use these as mantras because I have to remind myself, because I constantly am finding myself in these positions where I'm like, fuck. And those two things are, your attention is your currency. Literally is your currency. Social media apps and shit like that, they track your fucking eye gaze. Your eye gaze. When you click on things, people get money from ads. Your attention really is your currency in such a big, big way. And everything is designed to just take it away from anything that matters, anything that will lift you up, anything that will keep you in your power and in your magic. So it's very important to always remember this. And I fucking say it in my head a million times a day. Your attention is your currency. I have ADHD, so I get off track often. So it helps for me to remind myself of that. And the other thing is, you do vote with your dollar. That is in a capitalist society, that is a true fact. So it's very important to be aware of the things that you're feeling. But by sustainable, what I'm saying is changes that can last. Changes that can last. So a classic example would be what I call the Walmart predicament, which is one of the most matrixy things you can ever think of. It's almost beautiful in its simplicity of really capturing the problem, which is that we all know Walmart is a large evil corporation. It treats their employees like shit. It's, there's all these things, and we don't want to shop at Walmart, but we are living in this fucking system that keeps us down, that I don't have enough money. I don't have enough capital. I don't have enough of that to go. I can't just shop local all the time, because you know what? They're getting fucked by the matrix as well, because if they're doing things in a sustainable and ethical way, they have to charge more. They have to charge more, and they are not getting the breaks that the Walmarts, etc., are getting. So again, it's harm reduction. Nobody is saying like some people are like, you should boycott everything. In a perfect world, yes, but it's not a perfect world, and a lot of us are just scrambling to survive, right? So it's just something to be aware of. There was a time when it comes to your attention, shortly before I installed the block app on my phone, I was struggling with trying to be well informed as a freelancer who's trying to get work in order to pay bills, et cetera, trying to do that while maintaining my sanity. And I remember I asked for guidance one night, and I went to sleep, and I got an answer, and I heard a voice that was basically saying, you cannot wake up every day, willingly plug it into the matrix, and then complain that it's oppressing you. Right. And I had a very rude awakening with that, because I realized that's essentially what I was doing. First thing in the morning, I would look at my phone, and I would see if I got, did someone accept my pitch from last week, or what? I had very good intention reasons to do it, but I always got sucked into the vortex. And so that's when I kind of set up the block app, because then I could still check things that were important, but I could really cut myself off from the things that weren't. So that is just an example of your attention being your currency. So when I was talking about the Walmart thing, shifting towards spending in a way that is conscious is a good thing, but I mean that in the most judgment-free way, because I understand it's not a perfect world. We are talking perfect world solutions in an imperfect world. So then we're just, again, feeling like we're not doing enough, or we're not good enough, or somehow this is our fault. And like, we need to just stop. We need to stop diverting all of our anger from the matrix and like putting it on ourselves for not being resilient enough. I mean, my God, anybody, we are all beyond resilient. I will say that. If anything, we should have learned that over the past 18 months. So it's, when I'm talking about spending in a way that's conscious, there's other ways that you can do that. There's value in trading. Maybe you meet people, maybe you meet somebody, and this person is really great at, fixing cars, and maybe you're really good at art, or, and you can try and make a little trade economy. You can do exchanges. I know some communities have like free swaps and things like that. That's really cool. We can also challenge the beliefs, like we talked about earlier, that come from the matrix. I got a hole in my legging. Do I need to buy new leggings, or can I mend them? Do I know somebody that I can get to mend them? Can I trade them for something else? Can I somehow be involved in a local way that's meaningful and supportive, that is taking my money and my energy away from the matrix? So it's not just all about where you shop and things like that. It's about thinking outside of the box. And again, challenging the beliefs and asking, how much participation do we really need? Do we need to have this new phone? Do we need to have the latest this and that? Like, we're told we do, and we believe we do. And unfortunately, they set things up in a way that they don't give tech support after a certain amount of years. So it's set up in this way. But there are little ways we can try and get around it if we are clever and really just trying to remain in a space where that's our priority, is trying to solve that problem, right? So the next lifestyle shift is my very favorite, and that is rewilding yourself. So again, the success that we as humans found was somewhat at the cost of living. actually living and living freely. And I believe that part of the solution to this is to immerse yourself into the natural world as much as possible, and also not to fight your animal nature too much. So when we're in nature, it lends us this vibe of expansion, of clarity, and also of like sexy, dangerous chaos, right? Like nature really is its own thing. And there we really are confronted with the fact that we are not entitled to safety. We are not entitled to security. We are not entitled to instant gratification. We can see it. You can see it when you see, bugs fighting or birds fighting, or sometimes you see something like even more cool with like bigger animals and you're like, whoa, like I love that Instagram Nature's Metal. I love it because it's like, it's dangerous, sexy chaos. It's the natural world, right? So this is the real world. This is natural law. This is what's real, not what fucking Kylie Jenner is doing today, not the thing I should be panicked about this week. Like that's what's real. And that's why I say the Matrix is like the wedge. It's like the wedge between us and what's real. And again, when you go out into nature, it's very hard to be mad about weird, stupid, boring, low-level matrix bullshit, right? You get, again, that loving perspective slap. How much does that really matter? Like you out in nature, you're kind of like, fuck, I'm lucky to even be alive. You know what I mean? Like it's just this beautiful natural thing. And there we are in the presence of true magic. So I dare anybody to do a grounding exercise or look at a sunset or strip your clothes off and go, skinny dipping or run around in a meadow. I dare you to do that and say magic isn't real. This isn't about woo. This is about a very fundamental spiritual thing inside of us that is important and that deserves our attention more than any of that shit does. More than any of that shit does. And I recognize that nature access can be a privilege. But again, it's about making choices, right? Like I know for me, time is a big deal, very, very big deal. I actually don't watch TV or movies anymore. And that always comes off sounding so douchey because matrix thinking and things like that. It's not like I think I'm better than anyone. I literally got to a point in my life where I realized I needed time more than I needed anything else. And I had to make that choice. And I was like, what has to give? And I was like, that'll give. Occasionally I'll watch something and I usually don't even have the attention span for it. And I think that's because I've also been ruined by the matrix, the endless. I mean, I'm sorry. I think TikTok is like the most horrific thing in the world because it's really all it is. It just keeps going. It keeps going. You could drown in it. Like and it's taking high level concepts and putting them into like 30-second bites, which is again, quick fix, instant gratification type of thinking. And then we wonder why we don't let nuance at the table anymore, because we live in meme culture. If it can't fit on a little fucking square, we don't seem to really give it the time of day, right? So there's other ways that you can kind of immerse yourself in nature without actually having to like, oh, this is my land and I'm going to go foraging for the day. There are other ways that you can do it. So improving your self-sufficiency is one thing. And I think the pandemic was like a massive good example of that. Everybody and their fucking grandma was like baking bread from scratch. So what does that tell you about when we are experiencing a collective trauma and a collective state of uncertainty? One of the first things that most of us did was, people are doing victory gardens. People are learning how to can. People were cooking from scratch. Like, oh, isn't this like cute? No, this is your nature. This is your birthright. So yes, you should have turned towards that. And that you did is a great thing, but it just shows that there's that fundamental need that we have. It's also recognizing nature and making shifts to protect or work with it, right? So I'm not saying you have to go out and become an eco-activist, but it's neat to know, like it's neat to observe the changing of the seasons. Is it fall now because the calendar said so, or is it because you can see what's happening on the land around you, right? And it's moving with the cycles of nature. So moon phases, things like that, just trying to live your life in a way that is aligned with nature. Because back when we were uh, back when we were wanderers, back when we were nomadic, back when we were in tribal societies, that's what we did. That's what was normal. That is what our human nature and spirits are meant to do. And we don't do that because of the wedge. So that brings us to the third thing. Living deliciously. I love that because it makes me think of the movie The Witch at the end when Black Phillip, the goat, turns into like the devil and he's like, would you like to live deliciously? Ooh, chills. I love it. I love this. And I think this is such a great way to invite magic into your everyday in such a subtle way that is so nourishing and good. And what it is essentially is mindfulness. It's not being back here. It's not being, in the future here. It's not being out there. It's really being present in your body in the moment. The Matrix would have us all dumb, scared, and mindless. For real. Because then we shop, then we consume, then we just put our heads down and go to work, and then we don't really make waves. We're propping this system up. So fighting back can be as simple as reclaiming the authority and validity of your lived experience and consciousness, right? So I believe that you should treat yourself, the thing, I think it's community where it's like, treat yourself by living your life as if it's an immersive experience. So feel your feelings, indulge your desires. Not all of them, obviously. I'm not saying you should, take off with the mailman or whatever, but I'm just saying that we should pay some attention to our urges, our desires, and things like that, and sink into the sensory experiences of life. So, for example, if you're on the beach and you have the urge to kick your shoes off and just walk in the sand and really enjoy that, then fucking do that. If you're driving down the street and you see a beautiful rose bush or something out in the sticks and you want to pull over and fucking smell them, do that. We don't do that. It's this weird thing. Some of us do and some of us do a little bit, but more of us need to be doing it more often. If you have a hot drink, feel how it is in your hands, feel the steam running into your face, smell it, right? And these are things that you can do for anxiety as well. Like, there's the thing like name 5 things you can smell and things with this color, et cetera, et cetera. This is what it is you are trying to live in a way that you are really immersing yourself in the sensory experience of the moment. And then when you do that, you're more equipped and refreshed to decide for yourself what to turn your energy and attention to. So it's really important to live wildly and playfully. I don't care if we're grown-ups. Why do we have to lose the spark of joy that children have? Why do we have to lose the desire to play and follow our impulses and try and enjoy life? Like we lose that, and that's awful. It's awful because we need it. We need it way more than the kids do. So live wildly and live playfully and love with gusto, right? Even the cunts, just love them, whatever. Fuck you, blessings, carry on. What, like just live wildly and playfully, love with gusto, and laugh at the general absurdity all around us, even if it hurts. So yes, I live, laugh, love you, but I feel like it was in the best way. So #worth it. We have to sometimes just laugh at the situation things suck. And I believe that humor heals and things are actually really wonderful as well. But we're just so used to seeing all the things that suck. And we're just constantly being reminded of the fact that they do. But really life in those moments when you're immersing yourself in your experience, when you're watching a sunset, when you see the clouds doing the weird cloud stuff in the sky and you're like, whoa, that's beautiful, amazing, wonderful, everyday magic that fulfills our needs as humans to have spiritual experiences, right? And to feel connected. So consciousness and life in all of its pleasure and pain, all of it is a gift. So it's also really important, if we have bad feelings, not to just numb them by turning our attention back to all of these things that are quick fixes. We have to sometimes really sit in our bodies and stay there and try and anchor ourselves to feel through it. Because ultimately then instead we aren't caught up in the cycle of pushing something away more and more and more and more and more and more. Just let it move through you. It's going to suck. It's going to be awful, but it's going to suck and be awful either way. So just buy yourself some time. Ultimately, we need to call our energy back in from out there, from all of these tentacles, all of these different things. We need to call it back in to where it can serve us in a more practical and useful way. And if everybody did this, imagine, where we would be, right? So it's important to stay in your magic and stand in your power. So I believe that this limited paradigm of the matrix is boring. And again, I reject it. I believe that we are conscious co-creators in life. I believe that if we sink into looking at the positives, or if we even try and honor them at more of a balance instead of staying in a negative mindset, like this was my biggest struggle in life, was trying to overcome a very hardwired negative mindset. If you can do that, then you won't feel like a passive victim. I always felt like a victim. My whole 20s was awful. It was so bad because I just felt like life happened to me and it was like, well, I guess I just got the shit end of the stick and that's the way it's going to be forever. And it took me far too long to get out of that. But now that I'm out of it, I'm not going back. I can't go back. I don't care. I don't even care if everyone thinks I'm fucking delusional. I would rather be delusional for the rest of my time on this planet and happy than whatever the fuck it was for most of my life, right? So we need to just really stand confidently in the fact that we are way more than just a cog in this machine. I am more than a cog in this machine. You are more than a cog in this machine. We are divinity in the flesh. We are spiritual beings. We are mammals. We are of nature. We are connected. We have thought. We have consciousness. These are truly incredible things. And we are magic. We are capable. We are capable of so many more things than we're led to believe. And again, magic is living in an intentional way. It's mindfulness. It's cultivating your energy and raising your own vibration and consciousness in such a way that the collective has no choice but to raise with you. And when you live in your power, there are certain things that you can do to live in your power. It's living in a conscious, intentional way that takes your fucks away from the matrix. It's thinking critically despite conditioning and programming. Most of us at some point had to get past our own programming on an individual level, the shit that we grew up with from school or from our parents or from our lived experiences or from our traumas and all of that sort of thing. Well, unfortunately, we don't just have that. We also have all this other stuff, but that's okay because we're equipped to do it. And the more we unburden ourselves of all of that, the more we're able to do it going forward. It's embodying your authentic self. That's freedom, right? And that's not just saying do whatever you want at the cost of anybody else. Like if someone was like, nah, maybe you shouldn't do that for this reason, you're like, maybe that's a good point. I don't know. But you know what I mean? It's being willing to try it. It's being willing to be open. It's being willing to have like nuanced conversations. It's self-actualization and prioritizing fulfillment. You guys, I got to tell you, there's this day not long ago, I went to the beach with my family and I found this mint but there was a mint plant, a whole lot of it, between these rocks by the water. And I took some of it home and I made a tea with it. And it's such a slap in the face sometimes because we take things for granted. But I had this moment where I was like, I felt so fulfilled that I knew the plant. I could recognize the plant. I understood ethical harvesting of the plant. I knew what to use it for and to make it with. And I was able to do that, go home and make a medicine with it. Even though it was just a few leaves and 1 cup of tea, it stood for more than that. And that's something that a lot of us are missing in the modern apparatus that is the wedge between us and living wild. It's discipline in an instant gratification society that values quick fixes and rejects nuanced, complex conversations, right? So it's really, it's just rejecting this idea that, you know, we have to have everything now and everything has to be great and all of that. No, it's things are, people that are into witchcraft usually know there's so much gray area. And I feel like we live in this world that wants everything to be black or white, but there's so much gray. There's so much gray. And I feel like a lot of people don't know how to, it's usually the people that aren't willing to even acknowledge that the matrix exists, but are unwilling to acknowledge the gray and all the beauty that can be found in there, right? And it's recognizing and honoring your divine nature, that, you know, we're not just here to fucking work and go home and watch TV and then go to sleep feeling like we're longing for something else. There's so much more than that. And that was pretty much all I had to say. I did want to just let you guys know, I don't know if you had to take a chance to see yet, but there's a few things in the workbook. There's some journal prompts for trying to, just like questions for trying to untangle some of those limiting beliefs. So for example, like, how does the matrix show up in your life? Do you feel like you're super entrenched? Do you feel like you're mildly entrenched? Like, and it's the kind of thing that when I've asked myself this, my answer was different in the beginning of me answering it to when I answered it. Because the more you think of it, it's like pulling a thread, right? There's also a little meditation written out here, just something that you can do. It doesn't have to take long. Like a lot of times when I meditate, just because I have kids and I work and I do all of these things, sometimes it's only like a 5 or 10 minute thing. And then there's some affirmations and a dedication spell. So for those of you that are interested in spell work, this is it's a candle spell with a lemon, and it's for basically dedicating yourself to living freely as much as possible. Again, it's harm reduction. So does anybody have any questions or?